Hi, I'm Pastor Willie Vaughn with Out of the Box Ministries, and I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy week to join me today as we look into God's Word together. You know, all throughout the Bible, God calls His people to be holy. But what does that mean? He calls them to rise above the norm, to be set apart, to be above the rest. Now, if you've been around in religious circles, sometimes people can define holiness in different ways. Whether it's saying, oh, you have to be in a Bible study every day and never have any fun, that's what makes you holy. Or some people who try to define holiness by voting a certain way. But I've known a lot of people who've had a passionate party affiliation, yet were not the best representatives of God. Or maybe you have people define holiness as avoiding the apparent wickedness or evil of this world. Well, you're holy, you can't be homosexual or transgender, or maybe you can't be a felon, or you can't be a convict, a murderer, or a rapist. That's what makes you holy. And yet, as you look at the New Testament, you look at the ministry of Jesus, He defines it in a much higher way. If you've ever gone through the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 and 6, He really takes the idea of holiness, of setting yourself apart, to a higher level. And so we're going to look at holiness today, but not in the context of don't do good, don't do bad, but how do you set yourself apart? How do you rise to a higher level, both in God's eyes and in the eyes of the people around you? And we're going to look at a story where Jesus does a mass healing of 10 different people. And yet at the same time, how in that story, you see the one person rise above the other 9. How we can use that picture to rise above 90% of the other people around us and show a higher standard, show a way of getting better favor and being better representatives of God while enjoying the benefits of just being recognized as a better person, a better human being. And it's through the simple acts of showing appreciation. So we're going to talk about the power of appreciation. And we're going to start out by reading in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 17, verses 12 through 18. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to Chessa. Chessa, God bless you. I hope you're doing great. So let's read in Luke chapter 17, verses 11 through 19, a little correction there. Now Jesus was on His way to Jerusalem, and He traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As He was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met Him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, Lord, have pity on us." When He saw them, He said, "Go, show yourselves to the priest." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet, thanked Him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then He said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." So we see in this picture, there's a lot of going on in this, the power of appreciation. Of course, our knee-jerk reaction sometimes can be, when we rush through these stories in the Bible, is to kind of focus on one aspect. And we focus on this last guy, this the one out of the 10 who came back and thanked Jesus. And we're like, yeah, well, obviously he rises above. But if we jump to that without seeing in context the whole story, we miss out on some simple facts that all 10 men made a request. All 10 men showed faith by going when Jesus sent them, and all 10 of them were healed. And so in this idea of having the power of appreciation, I want to go through the whole story of what all these men did and how they received the blessing and the favor from that. And then focus on what that one did, that extra 10% of showing appreciation, showing gratitude and thanksgiving. So we're really going to get into the 4 aspects of appreciation here. We're going to see that we need to keep a reverence in our requests, that we need to be open to suggestion, be willing to do the work and expressing authentic gratitude when we show appreciation. So it starts out with this request. And the story starts out as Jesus is walking along, and these 10 men, they stood at a distance and cried out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us, have pity on us." And so you have to understand the context here of what's going on. These 10 men had leprosy. They had a skin disease that was incurable. And the culture, even the Jewish law of that day, required that they quarantine themselves. They kind of keep themselves isolated. In fact, this was such a difficult disease to deal with that they were required in the Jewish custom that when they went into a public place to yell out, "Unclean, unclean, stay away from me." And so these men, even in the midst of their need, even in the midst of their want to be healed, they showed a reverence, a respect for Jesus. They stayed at a distance and shouted out to him. And I love that because they actually lived out this spiritual concept found in Philippians 2:3, which says, "Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, consider others more valuable than yourselves or above yourself." And so even in the midst of their need, even in the midst of their wanting to be healed by Jesus so much, they respected him enough, they respected the customs and traditions and Jesus and his disciples enough to keep their distance. And so they did that, they kept a reverence. Sometimes we can get so caught up, I want this, I need it, I gotta have it, that we rush in and we interrupt people and we act rude. And yet when we appreciate others, when we have the humility to consider others above ourselves, we'll have this reverence and this respect even in our great want. And a lot of times understanding these men had a great need. It wasn't just, hey, I want a little something extra. They were needing a healing. They were outcasts. They really couldn't even be with their families because of this disease. And there was a great desire, and yet in the midst of that, they showed respect and reverence for the customs and for the people. But even in this idea of when we do this, when we show a reverence and a respect in our request, I think there's a little formula that we can go through. It's having this idea of when you ask for something and you really want to show appreciation and exercise the power of appreciation, go through this quick formula. Make a salutation, an identification, a question, and if necessary, a clarification. You know, I had this one time happen, and you would talk about starting with that salutation. That's just another way of saying a greeting or an opening. And I was working with a pipe fitter, and we were in a bottling company, and I had to go and get something from one of the company's employees. So I jumped right in and said, "Hey, can you get this for me?" And of course, he stopped me, and he said, "Hey, good morning." And I kind of was taken back, like, what? He's like, "Good morning. Slow down." And it really made me stop and think, yeah, listen, I don't even know this guy. And maybe instead of just jumping into, hey, can you get me this? Can you do that? Can you do this? Even before I make the request, kind of say, "Excuse me," or "Good morning. Hey, how are you doing?" Thinking about as you interact with people, if you have an appreciation that that person is not there to fulfill and meet all your needs, but that person is there to live their life. So, embrace them, engage with them in a way that's respectful and make that salutation. Maybe start out by a simple, "How are you?" "Hello," "Good afternoon." Kind of break the ice a little bit. Have that appreciation and say, hey, it's not all business. You are a human being and I want to acknowledge you. And so do that. Then make an identification. In our story today, these men cried out, "Jesus, Master," or "Jesus, Lord." They identified Jesus. Now, if you're dealing with someone in authority, maybe it's saying like "Sir" or "Ma'am." Or if you're dealing with someone, say, "Captain," someone who has got a military background. Maybe it's a reverend or a pastor or a doctor, addressing them with that title. Maybe you don't know them, and it's as simple like a "Sir" or "Ma'am." "Excuse me, sir." "Excuse me, ma'am." Maybe starting out with a little bit of identification and saying, "You look very nice today." Giving them a title or a compliment, showing respect when you ask that question, and really getting into it. One time I was talking with a pastor and I wanted to get some information from him. So I started out with this compliment and saying, "Hey, this is what I see in you." I said, "Pastor Rob, you have this ability to keep people excited about next week's sermon before it even happens. I want to get to know a little bit about that." So give the person a compliment. Identify, hey, this is what's really valuable about what you're doing or what you've done and I see in you. So you have the salutation, you have the identification, then you ask the question, "Hey, can I get some help from you?" And this can be even an introductory question. Sometimes instead of jumping on and you need something from somebody and jumping on and calling them in the middle of the day and cold calling them, shoot them a quick text and say, hey, do you have a few minutes to talk? Hey, can I have a few minutes of your time? I just want to talk to you about something and I have 10 minutes. Or you're talking to someone, hey, do you have a minute? And really getting that question out there to just start off. Don't just assume that whoever you're going to make a request from is going to drop everything and give you an hour of their time. Sometimes that may mean making an appointment. And so even in the story today, these 10 lepers, they just asked this vague question, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us, have pity on us. And yet there are times after that, after you get that question out of the way, when Jesus acknowledged them, you may need to provide some clarification. In fact, I always love to think about a particular time when Jesus was doing another healing. And he was on his way to Jericho in Mark chapter 10, verse 46 through 52. And this man had to make a clarification. Now, I'm not going to read the whole story, but Jesus was on his way to Jericho, and this blind man heard this crowd coming along, because Jesus often, when he walked around, people followed him and crowded around him. And when he found out it was Jesus, he started shouting, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, have mercy on me. And people were like, hey, man, shut up. Jesus is busy. And he's like, no, Jesus, have mercy on me, Son of David. And so finally Jesus stopped and invited him over. But after this initial request, Jesus asked him, what is it that you want me to do for you? Give me some clarification. And the blind man said, I want to see, I want to be healed. And so sometimes people may ask, you may say, hey, can I get your help with this? And they may say, sure, I'll help you. And they'll define the terms. Or they may ask for some clarification. What exactly do you need? So when you're going to make a respectful request, make sure you're clear about what you're asking for, what you want, what you desire, and what you're trying to get from the other person. To have a clear goal in mind. And this blind man, had a clarification. Now, we have to be willing to say, okay, sometimes people may ask for a clarification, sometimes they may simply say no, or sometimes they may help us in a way that they're able to in that moment. But we have to, if we really want to engage and see people continue to pour out help and engage with us, we have to appreciate where they are at each time. So we have to have that respect in our requests, but it also has to be willing, we have to be willing to be open to suggestions. And like I said, when it was in our main story, when Jesus was talking to the 10, he made a quick suggestion. Listen, I know you need healing. Go show yourself to the priests. Now with the blind man in Mark chapter 10, he actually engages. He stops and has a conversation with him. Now this gives us an idea of that when you ask someone for help, they may have all the time in the world to give to you, or they may be busy and have other things on their mind. So you need to be open to the suggestions that they make, open to what they're able to give you in that moment. And these men were open. These 10 lepers, when Jesus just said, kind of almost flippantly, he said, go and show yourself to the priest. He didn't tell them they were healed. He didn't touch them. He didn't speak over them. He just said, go. They were willing to immediately turn and head towards the priest to show themselves. And it's at that time that they experienced the healing, when they were on their way. They didn't get healed immediately. Now, at one other time, Jesus actually heals a man of leprosy, and he heals him first. He gets down and he talks with him and heals him. And after he's healed, then he tells the man, go and show yourself to the priest to have it confirmed and affirmed. But in this situation, Jesus is in Luke chapter 18. He's headed towards Jerusalem, it tells us in the beginning. He's really got the cross on his mind. He's getting ready to go and be crucified. So he's more focused on his mission, where earlier in his ministry, he was kind of a little more relaxed and would spend time. Here he's saying, listen, I'm on my way. I know where I'm heading. This is what I want you to do. And these men, they were open to the suggestion. But I want you to think about it in practical terms here. If somebody has ever asked you for help or advice and you say, hey, have you tried this? And they come with the attitude, oh, I tried that already, that didn't work. Or, oh, that won't work for me. They're not open to suggestions. are you really going to want to help that person? Are you really going to want to get involved? And it's the same way when we look for favor from others, when we look for advice, when we look for help, we need to be open to whatever suggestion they make, to be open to the possibilities, and at least say, oh, well, I tried that, but what can I do differently? So be open to those suggestions in that. And these men they had that faith to be open to Jesus' suggestion. But then they were also willing to work. And it says, in Luke 17:14, when he saw them, he said, go and show yourself to the priest. And as they went, they were cleansed. And so sometimes we need to be willing to put in the work. You can take everybody's suggestions, but I've been in those situations where people ask for help and I said, hey, why don't you try this? And they're like, that's a good idea. And then 3 weeks go by and you say, hey, how did that work out? Well, I didn't do it yet. So if you really want to have a power of appreciation, you want to show people that you care and you value their advice, you value their help, you need to be willing to put in your effort, put in your work. I remember when Jesus called Peter, he was willing to put in the work. And he got into Peter's boat, was doing some preaching, and it says in Luke 5:4-7, when he'd finished speaking, he said to Simon Peter, push out into the deep water, let down your nets for some fish. Simon said to him, Teacher, we have worked all night and we have caught nothing, but because you told me to, I will let the net down. When he had done this, they caught so many fish, their net started to break. They called to their friends working the other boat to come and help them. They came and both boats were so full of fish, they began to sink. And so not only was Peter in this story open to the suggestion, but he actually did what Jesus asked him to. He put out his nets. He could have had every excuse not to do it. He could have been like, listen, Jesus, you're a carpenter, you're a builder, you don't know anything about fishing. Listen, Jesus, you're this preacher, I'll let you stick to your preaching, I'll be the expert on fishing. He could have said, hey, I tried that before and it didn't work. He'd be like, Jesus, I tried all night long, you're crazy, I'm not going to do that. Yet Peter was willing to be open to the suggestion Jesus had and do the work. In the same way, all 10 of these lepers in this story, they were open to Jesus' suggestion. They didn't stop and argue. They didn't say, hey, we aren't healed yet. Why are we going to see the priest? Why are we presenting ourselves? And they began and they started the journey to the priest. They did the work. They did their part. In my own personal life now, I'm looking and saying, okay, God, I want to be faithful to do my part and leave the results up to you. And that's what these men did. They were willing to do their part. They wanted a healing from God. They wanted a healing from Jesus, but they had to trust Him for the healing and at the same time be willing to do their part. And when you want to show appreciation for others, when you want to engage in the power of appreciation, you need to be appreciating what others are willing to contribute to your cause or your goal, and then be willing also to do the work that you can do. Now, you can't do everything. Maybe you need some help in some areas, but sometimes if you show appreciation, say, I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to try to put into practice all the things that I can do, and then ask for help. People are going to acknowledge that, and there's a power in that. It's how you appreciate. You don't want everything handed to you. It's the understanding of that power of appreciation rather than entitlement. These guys could have said, listen, I want Jesus, I want you to do it all, and I just want to sit here and experience the blessing. And I'm sure you probably have known people like that. When they ask for help, what they really mean is they don't want help, they want you to do it for them. And so if you really want to live a life where you embrace the power of appreciation, you're willing to put in the work that you can do, to do what you can do, to be active in it, not just expecting everybody else to make things happen for you. But also, we need to understand that what really sets this last one apart was this gratitude, this authentic display of appreciation and gratitude. Because when this one man, the 1 out of 10, realized that he was healed, he ran back to Jesus and fell at his feet and just started praising God. And then Jesus was marveled at this. He's like, wait a minute, weren't 10 of you healed? How come only 1 came back? This act set him apart. I know as a young kid, I was always had it drilled into me by my parents and my grandparents to say please and thank you, and such that it was always just rooted in me. Even as an adult, going out to eat, when the waitress or the waiter starts bringing stuff, I say, hey, please, hey, thank you for doing what you do. And do it in such a way that you think about it when you say it. That's got to be authentic. Sometimes we say, yeah, thanks. And no, but that's not appreciation, but really looking at the person and appreciating whatever it is they're doing for you, and with a simple please, because they don't have to give you anything. Most people don't owe you anything. So when you make a request, say please. And when they've done it, say a simple thank you. It doesn't take a lot of extra energy. It doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of work, but it's simple. And yet at the same time, understand that maybe even if you're in leadership, maybe the person has to do what they do for you. You have to realize that if you can celebrate them, if you can be extravagant and authentic in your appreciation, you'll get a lot more. You'll get a lot more loyalty, a lot more passion in the work. In fact, thinking about it, whether you're leading a family and trying to, train up a young child, 5, 6-year-old son or daughter, or a teenager, or you're trying to get people to help you at work or at school, if you're willing to really go out of your way and say, hey, I appreciate you, what gets rewarded gets repeated. You think about that. When you do something for somebody and they really show a lot of excitement and celebration and thanking you authentically, you feel good. You want to do it again. And so we can embrace the power of appreciation when we're willing to extravagantly celebrate the good deeds of others. And that's what this man did. He fell at Jesus' feet and he praised God. He said, thank you so much. It reminds me of a time I was helping out a young man, and my wife and I got him a simple gift of some clothes. This young teenage boy was just getting out of high school, and he was having some family problems and needing a place to stay, and we gave him a simple gift. He was so excited of this basic, simple gift, it made me want to do more for him. And it's that same way when we're willing to celebrate, when we're willing to be excited and extravagant in our gratitude. It makes others want to help us more, want to get more engaged with us, and want to do more for us. And that could be a very powerful aspect in our lives. And so I hope that this encourages you, even as we're getting to the end of October, into November, we're getting ready for Thanksgiving, to live our lives with full of thankfulness, not just in our hearts, but with an outward expression and an appreciation for the people around us and an appreciation of all the things that God has done for us. I want to thank you for watching. I hope that this message has encouraged you, inspired you, and equipped you to live and walk in the power of appreciation so that you can rise above and shine for God and be set apart to experience favor with God and with the people around you. If you haven't already, I encourage you and invite you, stop at our website, outofthebox.org, and sign up to subscribe to get notifications for our weekly emails and when we have new content available to you. As always, until next time, remember, Jesus loves you, and so do I.